Hey there, you want to make some ice and snow? I love the holidays. Oh. I'm going to show you some simple and quick ways to make some ice and snow for your tabletop gaming pieces or crafts. But I also decided to incorporate making a little winter village along with it. This is a project I could really see my mom and I doing together when I was younger, so I'm dedicating this video in her memory. First, let's start off by making a little village that our ice and snow are going to go on top of. I had these two little houses that were from a craft kit my kids painted last year. I'm going to reuse them for this project. I had this round wooden plaque that is actually from an old broken spice rack. I always begin by laying everything out to make a plan of attack, which we can always deviate from later. I wanted to give more dimension to these houses. I had these little wooden sticks that I cut to fit on the roof of one of the houses. After putting down some wood glue, I placed them semi-tightly together. I didn't care about them being perfect in length, but after I got them on there, I realized I should have measured instead of just eyeballing it. I guess I'll just have to fix this up later. I also added some trim and doors to both of the houses. I then took an old ball chain necklace and I cut off a few balls to glue on for doorknobs. A little tip is to cup your hand over it while snipping so your balls don't go flying. And there's a joke in there somewhere, but I'll let you make it. And the houses are done for now. In my last video, I used air dry modeling clay to make bases. Since this was fresh in my mind and I had a lot on hand, I decided to use this clay again to quickly create some pathways. Using some sculpting tools, I made two little brick pathways for each house. Then I rolled out some more clay and made some large stone pathways. To help make a more organic pattern, I used different shaped seashells to press into the clay and then went over the shapes with a soft sculpting tool. Side note, try to say shaped seashells 3 times fast. That's a tongue twister. I chipped away at the edges and started laying it down on the piece. I kept creating more stones until I filled up the area I wanted. Then I made some hollow mounds and put them down. These are going to act as snow mounds later and also where the trees will be placed. I filled in all the gaps with PVA glue and lots of it. Globbing it on to cover all the gaps and areas, I'm going to sprinkle with some rocks and baking soda. This part was pretty messy, but this is what it looked like afterwards. Most of the baking soda is going to get brushed off, but at this stage, don't touch it. I let this dry for at least a full day. While that was drying, I started working on the trees. I grabbed some dried moss. This is the stuff you can get at any craft store. And I chopped it up in an old coffee grinder. This makes it finer and great for flocking. I got these little trees at the dollar store, but I wanted to make them look better. There are many ways that you can spruce up these trees, but I found this to be just a quick way to do it. I brushed on some PVA glue all over and then I applied the moss. Instead of just sprinkling it on top, I also squished it into the tree to really get into those gaps and fill the tree out. I let those dry for a few hours, and then I shook them to get any loose moss off before trimming. I think these look a lot better now with the flocking. I snipped the trees off their bases and then set them aside for now. Going back to the village, it was time to remove all that excess baking soda. Normally I work with smaller bases and use a large makeup brush for this. Since this piece was so big, I decided to use my airbrush to blow off more of it. Baking soda is going to go everywhere, so prepare for the mess if you do this. I definitely gave my airbrush a good cleaning after this. Here's what it'll look like after all that excess is off. Taking some texture paint, I filled in a few spots to make them more flush. I let that dry a little bit before I primed it black. When it came time to paint, I really wanted to stick to some simple colors and a quick paint job. Most of this was going to get covered in ice and snow in the end anyway. I wet blended some base coats, dry brushed it, and added a small amount of detail. I did a quick red wash on the brick, a soft tone wash on the stones, and a strong tone wash on the roofs. I touched up a few areas with some paint, and now, time to make the icicles. I'm starting out with some plastic wrap here, which I cut into smaller strips. I've done a lot of hot glue projects with my mother when I was younger, and I'm not sure where I picked this trick up from, but I've adapted it over time. I have a straightened out paper clip here, and I started to tightly wrap the plastic wrap around it. I'm going to keep twisting it to get it as tight as possible. Then I slowly pull out the paper clip and trim the edge at an angle. Use a lower temp hot glue gun and start with a bead of glue higher up and run it down the plastic. The plastic wrap will melt a little, and this might take you a few tries to get the form that you want. Just keep moving it around the wrap and build up as little or as much as you'd like. Once you have a solid formation, you can create the bottom of the icicle by dropping a little bit of glue and slowly pulling it away from the gun tip. I like to twist it around and go back and forth until I get a good sharp tip. Then slowly wrap the extra glue around the metal part of the gun tip. By tapping the tip of the icicle gently to the metal, you're going to get rid of all those stringy bits that naturally form with hot glue. I repeated this over and over to make multiple icicles. You can trim the icicles to your desired length. Try not to handle them too much though, at the risk of clouding up the glue. As a side note, I also found that this can be used to create spell effects. You can paint hot glue, though I definitely suggest using transparent paints for a cool effect. I've used red and yellow from Monument Hobbies for this little flame example. To add the icicles to the houses, I put a little super glue down and started to place them where I thought they would look good. I'm going to add snow on top of the houses, which will hide the way they are attached. I decided to add a little Mod Podge dimensional magic to the windows to give them a fake glass effect. And now, on to the snow. In the past, I've used Vallejo's environmental snow effects for my Night Haunt army. It has a very rocky texture to it and works better for chunky snow. I more recently picked up Citadel's Valhallan Blizzard for a Red Gobbo commission, and I definitely preferred the lighter snow effect. I needed a lot of snow for this piece, and I didn't want to use the whole bottle, so I decided to try to make my own. I got this idea from one of Eon's Battles videos, which I'll link below. He said to use equal parts white paint, PVA glue, and baking soda. Now, I've never done this before, but let's try it out. After mixing everything together, it seemed a little runny to me, but I'm going to trust the process and see how it goes. I started applying it to the base, and honestly, I really liked the way it brushed over the rocks. It was a nice powdery snow I was looking for. I did a good coat all over the piece, and then I started to build it up in some thicker areas, around the tops of the houses and where the icicles were. I admit I was having a lot of fun adding the snow, and I went a bit overboard. But I do love a good winter wonderland. Let's not forget about those trees. Since the ends of the trees are sharp from clipping them off their bases, they will easily puncture the clay. So I poked holes where I wanted them to go, added a little glue, and stuck them back in. Just need to add a little snow to finish them up. The last thing to do was to paint the rim. my little winter village full of ice and snow, all ready to be filled with holiday minis. Have you been nice this year? Or a bit naughty? I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe learned something new. And if you'd like to get me a Christmas present this year, just like and subscribe this video. Shout out to Emily for gifting me this awesome shirt.